Gaza-Israel conflict, new ceasefire talks and humanitarian crisis escalation. The Gaza-Israel conflict has once again taken center stage in international headlines, as new ceasefire talks are underway amid an escalating humanitarian crisis that continues to devastate the lives of millions. While diplomatic negotiations gather momentum in Cairo and Doha, the situation on the ground in Gaza remains dire, with shortages of food, water, medical supplies, and shelter pushing the population to the brink. The renewed push for a ceasefire comes after weeks of relentless hostilities, in which Israeli airstrikes and ground operations in Gaza have intensified following a surge of rocket attacks by Palestinian armed factions. The violence has resulted in widespread destruction, the displacement of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and an alarming rise in casualties on both sides. Ceasefire talks in motion. According to officials involved in the negotiations, mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations have been working tirelessly to broker an agreement that could halt the cycle of violence. The talks are said to focus on three primary goals: the cessation of hostilities, the release of hostages taken during cross-border attacks, and the establishment of humanitarian corridors to allow the safe passage of aid into Gaza. While both Israel and Hamas have shown conditional willingness to engage in dialogue, deep mistrust between the two sides remains the primary obstacle. Israel insists that any ceasefire must include guarantees for long-term security and an end to rocket fire, while Hamas demands the lifting of blockades and unrestricted humanitarian access. Diplomatic insiders suggest that although progress is being made, a breakthrough is far from certain. A senior Egyptian negotiator described the talks as fragile but moving forward, emphasizing that both sides remain under immense pressure from the international community to reach an agreement. Humanitarian situation on the ground. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has deteriorated to catastrophic levels. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, has reported that nearly 70% of Gaza's population has been displaced, with many families forced to live in overcrowded shelters or temporary tents. Clean drinking water is scarce, food shortages are worsening, and hospitals are operating far beyond capacity. Medical workers have issued urgent appeals for supplies, as power outages and fuel shortages cripple healthcare facilities. According to the World Health Organization, dozens of hospitals and clinics are either partially functional or completely shut down, leaving injured civilians with limited access to treatment. Aid convoys attempting to enter Gaza face immense challenges due to border restrictions and ongoing military operations. While some trucks carrying food and medicine have been allowed through, humanitarian organizations stress that the aid provided so far is only a fraction of what is needed to prevent mass starvation and disease outbreaks. International reactions and pressure. The growing crisis has prompted a wave of international responses. The United States, a key ally of Israel, has expressed support for ceasefire talks while continuing to affirm Israel's right to defend itself. At the same time, Washington has urged the Israeli government to minimize civilian casualties and expand humanitarian access. European nations, including France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, have echoed calls for restraint and humanitarian assistance, while also condemning rocket attacks targeting Israeli civilians. The European Union has pledged additional aid for Gaza, but warned that without a sustainable ceasefire, relief efforts will remain insufficient. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, countries such as Turkey, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia have strongly criticized Israel's military operations, labeling them disproportionate and devastating to the civilian population. Iran, a long-standing supporter of Hamas, has also increased its rhetoric, warning of broader regional instability if the conflict continues unchecked. At the United Nations, the Security Council has convened multiple emergency sessions, though deep divisions among member states have stalled any binding resolution. Russia and China have both called for an immediate ceasefire, while Western powers continue to emphasize Israel's security concerns. Regional implications. The conflict also carries broader implications for the Middle East. Analysts warn that a prolonged war in Gaza risks spilling over into neighboring countries, particularly Lebanon, where Hezbollah has increased its military activity near the Israeli border. Skirmishes in the north have already raised fears of a multi-front confrontation, which could further destabilize the region. Additionally, the instability threatens ongoing normalization efforts between Israel and Arab states under the Abraham Accords. Countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, which recently deepened economic and diplomatic ties with Israel, now face public pressure to reconsider their engagement. The human cost. Behind the politics and diplomacy, the human toll remains the most heartbreaking aspect of this conflict. Thousands of civilians, including women and children, have lost their lives in the latest wave of violence. Families mourn loved ones as they sift through the rubble of destroyed homes, while survivors face an uncertain future in a landscape scarred by war. Stories emerging from Gaza paint a harrowing picture of resilience amid despair. Mothers describe rationing food to feed their children, doctors recount performing surgeries without anesthesia, and aid workers speak of the emotional toll of witnessing widespread suffering. On the Israeli side, communities living near the Gaza border remain under constant threat of rocket fire. Schools, homes, and businesses have been forced to shut down repeatedly as sirens warn residents to seek shelter. For many Israelis, the sense of insecurity has become a daily reality, fueling demands for stronger government action. The road ahead. As ceasefire negotiations continue, the path toward peace remains uncertain. Analysts argue that even if a temporary truce is reached, lasting stability will require addressing the underlying issues that have fueled decades of conflict, including the blockade of Gaza, the status of Jerusalem, and the broader Israeli-Palestinian question. Without meaningful progress on these fronts, experts warn, any ceasefire may only serve as a pause before the next round of violence. Nevertheless, international diplomats stress that securing even a short-term halt to hostilities is critical to saving lives and allowing humanitarian relief to reach those in desperate need. Conclusion. The Gaza-Israel conflict stands at a critical juncture, with the possibility of ceasefire talks offering a glimmer of hope against the backdrop of immense human suffering. The coming days will be decisive in determining whether diplomacy can prevail or whether the cycle of violence will continue to spiral out of control. For now, the world watches closely, hoping that renewed negotiations will bring not only an end to the immediate bloodshed but also lay the foundation for a more lasting peace in one of the most volatile regions of the world.